Should kindergarten students have individual school supplies or should you use community supplies? It's one of the biggest debates in kindergarten classrooms and across kindergarten Facebook groups this time of year. If you're setting up your classroom for the new school year, you're probably wondering which system is easier to manage. And the truth is, there isn't one right answer, but there is one thing that matters more than whether students share supplies or have their own. It's teaching them how to use the supplies appropriately. In today's episode, we're talking about the pros and cons of community supplies versus individual supplies and how each system impacts your classroom management, and why the way you teach school supplies matters more than the system you choose. Let's dig in. Welcome to the Kindergarten Toolbox Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Murray, here to help you simplify kindergarten with tools and strategies that actually work with real live 5 and 6-year-olds. Let's dive into your shortcut to calmer days and more confident writers. The question everyone's asking is, should I use community supplies or keep them as individual supplies? And it's going to come down to a couple of things. One is really personal preference on how you'd like to run your classroom. And two might be how you can access school supplies. I was fortunate to teach in a school where school supplies generally were provided. Things like pencil, paper, crayons, erasers. We could even order scissors, though they weren't my favorite. All were provided by our school district, so everybody had the same. So community or individual would have worked. But if you're asking parents to send in school supplies, you may want to consider allowing their student to use the supplies that their parent bought for them, right? So that will weigh into your decision. Your seating arrangement in your classroom will also weigh into your decision. Are you sitting at community tables? Are you sitting in groups? Are you sitting in individual desks? If you have individual desks, it kind of makes sense to have individual supplies as well, whereas in groups or tables, sharing supplies makes more sense. So let's chat about the benefits of community supplies. You'll have less ownership drama, meaning they won't be fighting over whose red crayon it is or whose pencil that is. It's just you take the one that you have in the community bin. It's easier to replenish. You can just throw in a couple extra pencils, and it takes a lot less prep time to just put community bins together instead of individual things for each student. It can also sometimes be cheaper depending on how many of each thing that you need to buy for replenishment and things like that. The benefits of individual supplies are that you can teach responsibility and ownership a little bit more easily because they have their own things. You always know whose crayon box exploded all over the floor. You know who is using the broken crayons, and the kiddos who are taking care of their things get to use the things that are still whole and well cared for. And it's just a lot easier to teach personal accountability and responsibility when they have their own things. Now, I did always label their supplies too, and so that does take a little extra prep time. And sometimes managing replacement materials and you have to store all these individual supplies can be a little bit tricky depending on, again, how you get these supplies. But those would be the pros and cons of individual supplies. The real answer between community versus individual supplies lies in your management style. Whichever you can be consistent with is the system for you. Because truly solid classroom management comes down to simple systems you can use consistently. As long as you have a system, no matter what you choose, community or individual supplies, it will work. But I'm going to share what worked best for me and my classroom with our simple systems, because sometimes hearing what worked for other teachers helps you make an informed decision. So we always used individual supplies in pencil boxes, and I had 2 sets of classes because I taught morning and afternoon kindergarten. Yes, that does still exist here where I am in Pennsylvania. But anyway, so each student had their own, not just like this was for morning and afternoon. They each got their own toolbox. They were different colors. I used to buy them at Walmart in the summer. The morning class would have clear. The afternoon class would have either color or gray or black. It doesn't matter. But as long as they were two different colors, so they were easily differentiated. These were called toolboxes because they held our school tools. These were not toys. These were tools that we used in our learning. The toolboxes were labeled with their names, and then everything that went into the toolbox got their number. Because in my classroom, we had student numbers, just in alphabetical order, because it helped things to run more smoothly. So this meant if the student's number was 17, the pencil had a 17. The eraser had a 17. The crayon box had a 17. The toolbox itself got the number 17. The glue stick and the glue stick lid got a 17 because those glue stick lids have a habit of disappearing, but everything got their number so that when I found things on the floor, I could pick it up and say, hey, so-and-so, your number 17, this is yours. Please make sure that you're taking care of your things. It was a great way to teach responsibility, hold them accountable, and teach them how to take care of their things. And I knew whose it was. So if it was a pervasive problem that this number 17 glue stick was always on the floor uncapped, I could talk to mom and dad and be like, hey, we're really working on taking care of our school tools. Here's an example. It just made life so much easier. The other reason we used individual toolboxes is because they kept them in their cubbies because we worked at tables. We didn't have individual desks to store them. And the reason they stayed in the cubby was because I used that for purposeful movement during our transitions. So if we were at the carpet getting our instruction and then they were ready to go off and do their independent practice at their tables, I would dismiss them. But however I did from the carpet, sometimes it was by table, sometimes it was by group, sometimes it was girls go first, you get it. But I would dismiss them and they would go to their cubby, get their toolbox, and take it to their table. This gave them some purposeful built-in movement throughout the day. And then we could also be keeping track of all of the individual supplies. The only supplies that I did not keep in their toolbox were scissors. They never had their own scissors in their toolboxes. When we needed scissors, I would get the scissors out and then I would put them away when we were done. Too much can go wrong when scissors are left out. We don't need haircuts or clothing alterations. It's just a lot easier. Now, trust me, we did go over scissor expectations, and scissors are only for cutting paper. And I mean, we drilled that. And they were held accountable if scissors were used for anything other than cutting paper. But just too much can go wrong in a kindergarten classroom. It was one of me, 20 of them. The scissors did not stay in toolboxes. Expo markers, dry erase markers did stay in their toolbox. Once again, they were numbered so that we could keep track because kindergartners have a habit, all students, by the way, have a habit of pushing those tips into the marker and then they're not usable. So we kept those in the toolboxes too because it just helped everyone to stay accountable. So for me and my classroom, that made it easier. Was it a little more time consuming because I had to number all the things? Yes. But was it worth it? 100% yes. My classroom ran more smoothly. We used less school supplies. Things were kept nice. And it was all because I could hold them accountable because they had individually numbered supplies. But like I said, no matter which system you choose, individual supplies or community supplies or a combination, it really comes down to how you introduce and teach them how to use their school supplies. Okay, you need to, at the beginning of the year, my kindergartners got an empty toolbox and we introduced the school tools one by one. And as we introduced and practiced with them, then they got to keep their tools in their toolboxes because they've mastered these new skills. And it just made my life so much easier when we started to do it this way. If you are looking for ways to introduce these school tools, be sure to grab our free school tool worksheets down in the show notes. We also have the school tools slides that you can use. They're editable, and you can change the text on them to make it match your expectations. So you can use those to introduce the tools to your students. And if you want to dive even more in depth into how to plan the best first week of kindergarten yet, please join us inside the First Week of Kindergarten Blueprint Workshop. I will drop all the links to learn more about that down in the show notes. Remember, there is not a wrong answer here. Just because individual supplies work best for me doesn't mean it's what works best for your classroom. The supply system isn't what matters most. It's teaching students effectively how to use those supplies and having a system that you can enforce consistently. That is where the magic is. That's it for today. Until next time, have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Kindergarten Toolbox. I'm Amy Murray, and I'm so glad you're here. Be sure to check the show notes for all the links and resources from today's episode. For even more tips, tools, and support, head to teachingexceptionalkinders.com or connect with me on Instagram at teachingexceptionalkinders. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow along and subscribe to the show and take a minute to leave a review. It helps other kindergarten teachers to find us too. Teaching kindergarten is tough, but you're not alone. Here's to calmer days and more confident writers. You've got this.